Hi everybody, this is Professor Ian, part three of my lecture on rhetorical situation soapstone. So we looked at speaker in this article. I asked you to watch a couple of videos, two different versions of the Moana trailer. You can find those on the Canvas site. One, of course, is just a regular trailer from Disney, and the other one is Moana as a horror movie, right? And you can see how the creators of those two different texts are using the same kind of content, right? Scenes from the movie, but they're cutting very different kinds of trailers and a very different kind of tone and mood, very different kind of tone again, the attitude towards the subject. In the horror movie, Moana is some kind of like haunted or beleaguered figure being tossed around by supernatural forces in this like horror world. And of course, the Disney world is very bright and light, and it's a tale of a young woman discovering her heritage and herself, and it's a great movie. I like Moana a lot, especially the part with the coconuts. But this you can see the difference, right? And just the different techniques that the creators use to get these different tones. You can think about the music, the sound effects, right? The scenes they choose, the way in the horror movie version they do a lot of jump cuts, right? Very common in horror movies. They're not changing anything. They're not adding material, but they're just arranging it in different ways to create a very different tone and mood in that piece. And it's kind of like tense and frightening, and they darken the palette and they use dark scenes. They use a lot of like light and bright scenes, and it creates a very different kind of tone. So it's just a fun way to think about that. Authors are generally not, or rhetoricians are generally not that overt in what they're doing with tone and mood. Sometimes they are, like that pedigree ad I asked you to watch. That one's pretty over the top, right? But usually it's not that over the top. Usually it's a lot more subtle. So we need to think about, language and imagery and such that's being used in texts. So again, tone, the attitude towards the subject the author expresses using specific textual strategies. So word choice, imagery, body language, etc., depending on what kind of text. So again, if we return to our Jaya Powell article and think about her tone, if you look through this, there's a lot of the I, right? Right. A lot of talk about her family, very earnest. There's no sarcasm, there's no humor here, right? This is a very earnest testimony of one person who feels the value of their immigrant past, talking about why that's important in this other person, and using that to sell that person as the VP pick for the Democratic Party. Also, where was I going to point it out? Again, that paragraph where he's talking about Trump, calling him xenophobic, and talking about, caging children, separating families. These are very specific examples to use about Trump. We could you could write a very different article about what Trump's done in office, and choose different examples and different words, not call him xenophobic. Xenophobic means, afraid of the other or hate of the other, right? So, very loaded language to use, very much part of the tone she's trying to strike. This kind of, very much an attack on Trump. As much as this article is, supporting Harris, it's also an attack on Trump, and you can see that in the tone she uses to describe the Trump presidency, right? So we need to think about that diction, imagery, figurative language. My example here, sleeping on a Sealy is like sleeping on a cloud versus Sealy mattresses are comfortable. It means the same thing, but in the first one, we're using very figurative language, right? A simile in this case, right, to create a kind of poetic connection or like an image in the reader's mind, versus the second, which is very objective. Sealy mattresses are comfortable. Just a blunt statement. So that's what we're getting at with tone, like what kind of word choices, imagery, and things like that are used. Some other things to think about: formality of the diction and the syntax. Again, this article is not super formal, but it's not informal. She's not using slang and contractions and such. But it's not the kind of thing you would find in an academic journal. It's kind of midway between that. She's writing for an educated audience and writing in a semi-formal kind of way. Here's an example I have here, right? To example of the same idea expressed. I saw Get Out, the movie, last night. There are a number of fascinating aspects in the film, such as the depiction of race and intergenerational strife that will reward critical attention. Right, so kind of formal diction, uh, depiction, intergenerational strife, critical attention, right, et cetera, et cetera. Versus, I saw Get Out last night. Man, that movie really pushes the envelope at all kinds of crazy stuff, right? So saying kind of the same thing, but this one's much more informal, something I might say to a friend. This one is something I might write in an essay, right? And that really helps us determine, how the author is presenting this idea. Again, the rhetorical situation. To whom are they writing? To whom are they not writing? So then, once we've gone through the SOAPSTone acronym, it's time to put this all together. We can, put together all the information you've generated and start thinking about the effectiveness of the text, because the text might be effective in one situation, whereas it's not for another in another. If we return one last time to the Jayapal article, this article, again, is not really written for supporters of Trump, and I'm sure, if Sean Hannity read this, he would not have the same reaction as someone who doesn't like Trump, right? So again, this might be a very effective article to convince a Democratic supporter that Harris is a good pick as the VP, but it might not be so effective if read by someone who's not part of that target audience, right? And that's what SOAPSTone can help us to think about in part. That's one of the things it can help us to think about, is like, okay, well, this might be effective in a certain situation to certain audiences, and that's why it's written that way. That's why it's not written another way. And it's going to help us look at the effectiveness of arguments and even the reason for arguments and such. Okay, so that's it for now. That's just a handy tool I like to use, SOAPSTone. Again, I like it because it gets you to pause and think about what goes into a piece of writing before you get into the actual content of the writing. Okay, that's about it for now. Thank you very much.